Welcome back to Vaulted by Proof. I'm Eli Scheinman, Director of Art at Proof and Yuga Labs. Today is the OGs episode, meaning we have two real OGs from the digital art space joining us. First up, we have Priyanka, who is the COO of Tribute Labs and a member of Flamingo DAO. What's up, Pri? Great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And Pri, you were on back in the day, right? This is not your first appearance on the Proof podcast.
Yeah, way back in the day. This is my second time. Excited to be here.
Awesome. And then we also have Kayvon Tiranian, who's the founder of Rodeo and, of course, Foundation. Lots of meaty stuff to unpack with you today, Kayvon. Excited to have you here.
Thank you, Eli. And yes, I think this is, despite being in the space for a while, my first time on the show with you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be here with Priyanka.
And you guys go way back, right? You dropped a little anecdote before we hopped on. You met Flamingo DAO even?
We were both, in the space in 2020, which I would describe as kind of a primordial soup in which lots of different ideas and concepts were floating around, and I would pitch Priyanka and Priyanka would pitch me, and things took off from there, and hit 4 different levels. But we were in the Zoom chats during the pandemic trying to connect the dots very early on.
Yeah, I remember that. And also like in the Discord, in the Foundation Discord too, I feel like I'd pop in there and, share the stuff. I actually feel like I remember bidding on, I might have been some of the early bids on Foundation when you guys had that like XDAI bridge, like that first launch.
Yeah, Priyanka was on versions of Foundation people don't even know about. So
yeah, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because a lot of people think a lot of this new L2 stuff is new. We were trying to do that in 2020. Obviously too early, but yeah, we've been trying to bang on some of these ideas for a long time now.
Yeah, and we'll certainly get to that, and excited to unpack everything you're doing now, Kayvon. Let's start though with your picks of the week, so to speak. These are collections or artworks or things that you've seen recently that you want to highlight. Pri, maybe starting with you. You have a really interesting collection to share.
Yeah, so this isn't maybe like relevant for this week, but past couple weeks, very excited about what's kind of coming out of the zine world, and I can kind of share this, but it's the Parker Ito drop, which are these like digital pieces that are tied to 10,000 physicals, which is pretty unique. So kind of think that's cool.
Yeah, I love this. And this was a couple weeks ago, I want to say. I collected one. These are great.
Yeah, and they're like AI collages, so they're cool.
Yeah, and I don't know a ton about Parker, but I know like the collectors and the other artists that I respect so much were all participating and collecting from this release.
Yeah. I think what's kind of interesting is the fact that there's also like 10,000 oil paintings that are like original that are tied to a digital counterpart. And I think that's pretty unique too.
Did you collect the physical? Because I know that there's the option to, right?
Yeah, I did. I bought a bunch of the digital, but I think I redeemed like one of mine. So I haven't gotten the physical yet. I think they're like still, doing that. But yeah, I did redeem.
Love it. This is a great share. And of course, we'll share all of these links. Okay, Kayvon, over to you. I know what you're about to share, but excited to see it. What is your so-called, pick of this week?
Yeah, I think, Eli, this is the really fun part is it's not even the week. I can just show you what I'm collecting today. And I think it'll be a good segue because that I think is the beauty of Rodeo is it's something you can do every day.
Yeah.
Here's kind of, we have this feature called Top 9, which allows you to kind of take your top 9. If I were just to walk through it, I mean, Marcelo has a few pieces. This is an AI art exploration that I collected. Here's a gen art exploration that I collected. A piece from Bruce, who I think we all know and love.
Yeah.
I'm very into just the frontier and edgy sort of exploration. So I love Blank Spacer, who does a lot of AI art. and then I think they're my favorite, photographers, Cody Cobb, is a piece. And then I think it's really interesting. It's really similar to Ali. A lot of texture, but these are all natural environments, which is pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I'll just highlight Dennis. Yeah, go ahead.
You collected all of those today?
Yeah, so
it's pretty wild.
It is. I think that's the really cool part is like this is a product that is, I mean, in its best form can be used daily. And I know that probably is a little bit alien to an art collecting crowd, but I think that's the thing that we're trying to understand where the edges are of this new technology. But yeah, these are all things that I basically have collected in the past 24 hours, and because you can see these blinking dots, these are the pieces that are still live.
I see. Sure. Yeah, and everything on Rodeo is ephemeral in that way, right? It's time bound. The mint window, so to speak, is limited.
It's 24 hours.
Yeah.
So there is scarcity. I think that's the really interesting thing is like, it's not, everyone kind of calls them open edition or, these other concepts, but it's like, these things prove that you were plugged in at that moment in time and kind of got it. Right. Well, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, let's segue and talk more about Rodeo, Kayvon. And just quickly, as you were showing your profile, I could imagine that given the number of works that you minted just today, if you abstract that out over, let's say, a year, that you could imagine some beautiful physical representation of a year of collecting on Rodeo. That would be quite cool. But let's talk, there's been so much controversy or conversation or dialogue around Rodeo. And I think it's primarily rooted in the fact that artists are asking this question, as are collectors: should what is functionally an artwork be commodified or made available in such a way where there's basically zero friction, meaning the cost is almost zero, and the process for acquiring it is also incredibly easy. Kayvon, from your purview, maybe help ground us a little bit in why you think Rodeo is an important dimension of the art collecting and creation experience.
Yeah, Eli, I want to be really clear. I don't have like the answers. What I have is an exploratory mindset is maybe the way to think about it, which is, and Pri was there for this, but when we first built Foundation, you had the constraints of the L1 blockchain, right? And so I think what happened is you had people develop ideas in their head of what this market was. And I think the market that we know is the art market that exists in the physical world. Now, the real challenge as we kind of continue to evolve in a digitally native world is the constraints of the physical world are an analogy. They don't exactly exist in the digital world. And so the technology is evolving. And so when we built Rodeo, what we really asked ourselves, and what you see as a result, is a product that reflects the current technology and what it can do. And so when you had the art market that formed in Web3 in sort of early 2021, that was where gas was very expensive. So even putting something on the blockchain could cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And to interact with it would cost another $50 to $100. We've now gotten to the point where we've built up the ecosystem to where transactions are fractions of a penny. So, people are, obviously the technology is changing. And I think that what we're doing is we're saying, cool, we'll push the boundaries. Now, does that mean that the physical art market that we've known and kind of used to kind of grapple with what we're building here applies? I think the assumptions start to break. And I think this has happened in all sort of internet innovation, is that the internet has its own properties, its own physics. And so the idea that we're not going to be able to, and if you ask some of the artists that are very active, like Josh Davis, OG generative artists, they have gigabytes of work, right? That's sitting on some hard drive somewhere. Now that we've gotten rid of the fact that it's not, prohibitively the cost prohibitive to put work on chain, Josh wants to put most of his work on chain, right? And how is he going to do that? Well, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces. And so I don't think everything will be put up for auction in a very sort of precious manner. I think like the Rodeo's design is if you're there and you like it, give the creator an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And that, it's not free. I think that's where I get that it's relative to thousands of dollars. It feels free, but there's still transactions happening. It's still financial.
Yeah.
And then we're just exploring the boundaries, right? I don't have the
Yeah.
answers, Eli.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I totally agree. I feel like right now it's just let's explore. Why don't we play with the digital medium? And a lot of what we're doing here is like, why not work with the speed of the internet as it exists today? The speed, the distribution, all of these different factors which were not available in the art market, and like not even use that as a comp. And I appreciate the experimentation. I think this is the kind of stuff that we need to figure out exactly where we fit in. Plus, I think to the point that you were making, I think artists also like the idea of sharing their work. Like maybe they don't necessarily want to create, some sort of like punching market price, but they want to share something almost like a, scratch pad or just something that they're iterating on, and they want to like put that out there to see how the world likes it. I feel like that's the kind of stuff that you want to welcome. And because this is all digital end to end, like why not also like lean into the speed of the internet. Aaron kind of built up during the Web 2 era, but often says like, with podcasters, a lot of these early podcasters, because of a new medium, were able to build up an audience. You look at YouTube creators, like they were the initial group. They were net new. They weren't around like moving from radio to YouTube to podcasting. You have like a whole new audience that comes in. So why not kind of lean into that? And I feel like there could be communities of people or even art collectives of people on Rodeo that just build an audience this specific way, releasing work on a very frequent, low cost basis, and develop a new audience as a result of that.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I want to unpack there. First, and I agree with much of what you both said. Pri, maybe riffing on your notion of this being a scratch pad, a place to share work, or Kayvon, as you said with Josh, he has all of this material, he wants to put it out into the world. Why does that need to be connected to an on-chain behavior and action of minting that work? Like, why can they not just use Twitter, for example, and share that content in the way that others have in the past?
That is the precise question I want to know myself. So I can share, some of my own hypotheses, but
Sure.
if we even take Josh's case, we all know that there's an on-chain value prop. So in Josh's case, it's archival work. He doesn't want to just live on a Web2 network, right? So he puts it on Rodeo. I think the thing about Rodeo that's powerful is, yes, it feels like a lightweight, fun app, but under the hood, it's all on chain. So, Rodeo goes away, the interface goes away. Josh's profile is still there. All the work's still there. You all own, whoever collected it has a copy of it in their wallet. So, it's really just trying to push on some of these value props that we've kind of grown to appreciate from the prior era and say, why is that valuable in this era? And so, I think you're asking a great question, Eli, and that's one that I think we're really trying to come up with the sharpest answer possible.
Sure.
But then the other aspect of it is like you can really embed value into it. So I think we often are talking about free. I think the frustrating thing I have is I've never personally used that terminology to describe what we're doing, because we are paying people. It's not priced work in auction at high price points. But in Josh's case, he's actually, and you can ask him yourself, right? And he'll tell you this, like he's making hundreds of dollars. And again, it's in a social context. He's not trying to sell things he has other ways in which he does that. He has FX hash collections and foundation auctions, right? These are things he's doing, but he is engaging in some level of support when he's participating on Rodeo, which I think is new and interesting, right? I think putting something on a Web2 platform, I would love for you to. I wish we had a few artists on board, but I'd love to that you could ask. But it has new properties.
Yeah, well, I think you're bringing up something that I hadn't thought too much about previously, Kayvon, which is through the lens of conservation and preservation and sort of this archivist mindset of wanting this scratch pad, these works to exist in perpetuity. I think more or less. There's an interesting element there that I hadn't totally thought through previously that I think is part of that value prop for why it does need to be minted, perhaps, and there does need to be an on-chain action associated with the sharing of work. I think that that's an interesting element. Lastly, before we move on here, do you think an artist can make a living on Rodeo? Do you see a world where there's scale and that becomes possible?
Eli, the vision is yes. In today's current constraints, I don't think the answer is yes because the scale is not sufficient. But I think part of the vision of Rodeo and what we're iterating towards is finding ways in which millions and millions of people can come and engage in this behavior. And I think a world in which that's true, I actually think the answer is yes. Because you could find audiences, I think Priyanka is talking about, who can support you on a daily, weekly basis.
Yeah.
And yes, they're engaging in very small microtransactions, but those add up at scale and over time.
Mm-hmm. And Pri, maybe coming over to you here for a moment, at Flamingo DAO, of course, you guys are collecting at the very highest end in many cases of the body of work from artists who are now playing and participating on Rodeo. From the Flamingo DAO, if you put that hat on for a moment, or your own collecting perspective, does that concern you at all that there's an erosion of value with those top end collections if that same artist is making work available, albeit in a different context, for a very, very small fee?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I feel like something that people have discussed here and there. And this is like also just my personal view. I think because, to your point, it is very contextualized in that setting, and it's folks. There's like different purpose for sharing work in different platforms in different contexts. You could even, and I know this is not that world, but like in the traditional art world, like you have artists similarly like sharing works that are more for public consumption, and then a select few for quote collecting. That's how I think I view it. I think also so do other people. If anything, the perspective is like this is a really good discovery mechanism and a good curation mechanism. Like for my collecting view, and even those of the DAO, I think oftentimes are looking to Rodeo or other platforms to see like emergent artists that are developing interesting work. It might not necessarily be like focused on value, and I think that this is a totally different part of the market where it's just entirely net new, and it's very positive for artists. And I think it's all about distribution, exposure, and there's a whole like a lot of what Kayvon noted. But I think a lot of this is kind of actually more curatorial and discovery, which I think is amazing too. So I think that's been a huge benefit.
Yeah, I love that.
And Eli, I want to weigh in really quickly too, because I think I want to build off of what Priyanka said, which is if you look at the provenance of things, you can really analyze them differently. And I have my own mental models, and I think people will have their own, and Flamingo, I think, will have their own. But it's like, if you look at a Rodeo post, it's an 1155 token, right? I'm getting a little technical, but I imagine the audience can handle it, right? It's like, it's a different token type. It's a different token standard. It lives on its own contract that is kind of labeled as a like Rodeo post contract. So if you think about what you're putting on chain, there's ways in which to differentiate things that I think have different modalities. And if I were speaking as a collector, I collect Rodeo posts as 1155 tokens in a very lightweight, casual, fun manner, right? And if I were to go and get a 721 token from a artist that I know that is putting it up in auction or in another way, I would treat that differently. And the blockchain actually also records that, right? So if you think about provenance and value and markets, you will be able to, in 50, 100 years, completely distinguish these things, right? You will not get them confused. Right. Because anyone doing the real work will go under the hood to look at what's going on. And we've built the mechanisms, and Foundation's always built this way. I would bring this one data point back is we built Rodeo as a separate app because we think it's a different use case. The technology is completely different. There's nobody confusing Foundation auctions with Rodeo posts. They're really, really different technically all the way down.
Yeah, well, I think, again, we're circling around this notion of a very context-specific use cases, and I think it is important. The 1155 element is interesting. Kayvon, I pitched you on where I posted somewhere I think it's 7160 as a token standard is maybe interesting in this or a different or similar use case. Pri, were you going to jump in?
No, I think I was just going to note, like, I think the context dependency, I think that was just a good way to differentiate. And I think that's what you're doing is so interesting, is because we don't know where this will go. And even thinking about like where value will accrue, like because these auctions are only 24 hours, it could be possible that one of these 24 auction, like post mint, becomes a larger, value market sentiment around it.
Yeah,
Agreed.
So I think the
Agreed.
time constraint is nice there too. But sorry, please continue.
No, that's great. But actually, let's use that Pri to segue and talk Flamingo DAO for a moment. I'm always so curious about what's happening at the DAO. You guys, of course, have been such incredible patrons and collectors across the entirety of the digital art space, truly at scale, and such an important figure. Give us sort of the Flamingo DAO state of the union. How are things feeling? What's happening at the DAO right now? And then we can dovetail from there.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the DAO is credited to its members. I feel lucky to even be a part of like its growth, and we have such amazing people that are part of it, and just a vibrant, robust community. I think it actually just speaks to the power of what communities are even capable. Like the fact that it's been able to really like leave a mark on digital art collecting, and creating really kind of shaping certain perspectives on subsects of art form, like of digital art, whether that be generative. Right now we've been talking a lot about like compression art. I think there's just a lot of interesting conversation constantly happening, both just on art forms and the market, and so as it exists today, I mean, the last couple of years have definitely been an evolution. So, it's launched in October 2020. So I think actually Kayvon and I kind of around the same time, I'm pretty sure like Foundation was like what, summer 2020. Kayvon, you guys went live, or November. I forgot exactly when, but I think just that like being there for that period of time, and then today, I think at the TLDR is the members of the DAO have like a multi-decade perspective on this as a category. I think the amount that we've all been able to accomplish and the work that we put in has been pretty tremendous for such a short time frame. But I think people's view is like a lot of this stuff is going to age, and this is going to have a place in contemporary art. I don't know what that place is yet, but it's going to be meaningful. And that's the view, and it's just honestly taking it day by day. And like the market highs and lows are just not, I mean, it's obviously you're going to pay attention to it, but it's not something that people are that concerned about as far as like timelines are concerned.
So I'm so interested, Pri. I've never fully understood how Flamingo has the capital they do to deploy and collect at such scale. What is the fundraising strategy for Flamingo DAO? Is it based solely on, I guess, that initial membership? Can you unpack that just a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily based on that initial membership. So it did launch in October 2020, but like no one cared about this stuff until like, frankly, I want to say it closed actually that week. It bought the Alien Punk in like mid-January, and then February, March, you had the Beeple sale, and then the whole space kind of exploded. And so that's actually when Flamingo closed, because it was open for 5-6 months before close. And so it's kind of ripping off that initial capital, and then there was a subsequent fundraise like I think a year after that, and that's kind of been the fundraise at this point. There hasn't been like anything else since.
Got it. And as you think long term, I mean, you mentioned multi-decade for most of the members or the DAO at large in terms of the mental model of the collection. But as you zoom out, over many years, are the aspirations of the DAO to be something akin to the Guggenheim, where these works from the collection migrate into a physical space where a whole new type of audience can experience them, and they do a different type of educational work than they are today, perhaps? Or is there, a very specific liquidation strategy in 10, 20 years? How do you think about the long-term role and future of the DAO?
Yeah, it's funny. That conversation will come up periodically. It kind of depends on who you ask when, as far as like their perspective. There's no liquidation strategy, as I noted. People have a very long term view, so I don't think it's not like a day to day conversation. That said, I've heard members like Snowfro and others, even in like public settings, note that they hope that one day there'll be a space for Flamingo DAO. And it's come up a bit. I also think what's interesting is like we could probably do a pretty awesome Flamingo show, because just to the point Kayvon was noting about archiving, like we have all of the chats since the beginning, every acquisition, and like we have the calls and everything. It'd be kind of amazing at some point to do some sort of show. But again, like, I don't know, that was just a thought, simply because like it would be amazing just to be able to like show how collecting is done in these like Discord communities. I think people would find that compelling, but I don't
Yes.
know if we're anywhere near that.
Right. Well, I will plus one the notion that would be compelling. And I think, I've heard that Flamingo DAO is like remarkably nimble in terms of the way that you make your decisions. And that I think it's like mostly in the Discord, although I could be mistaken. But yeah, that material, finding the right venue to accompany the work, ultimately, I think sounds super compelling. And it's so interesting to go behind the scenes a little bit with Flamingo DAO. You could also imagine some big physical space with a beautiful big flamingo out front. Lots of fun there. Let's take this collecting conversation into our last segment here, the what's in your vault section of the show. Kayvon, maybe we'll start with you here. What's one work or a couple pieces you want to share from the Kayvon art collecting vault?
Yeah, Eli, love to. I think I'm sharing my screen now. There's a nice feature. I mean, I'm going to go, if we're going to bring it back to our prior conversation, these are mostly the 721 sort of higher end, auction pieces that I've collected on Foundation, as opposed to Rodeo and its more accessible price point. I mean, things I'll just call out is, AI art, Helena's piece, obviously.
We love Helena.
Yeah, photography I think is an underappreciated category. But like Noah and Cody, Utreda was very early to Foundation and kind of continues to be, I think, a very strong cultural voice in the space.
Yes.
I collected, Nicholas Sassoon's first work Onchain, which was this Alone in the Sea piece, when I think a lot of people had yet to really put the pieces together on digital art and blockchains. This was a very fun auction to kind of win. There's David Rudnick's Tomb series. And probably lastly, I just call out like, Holly Herndon. This was actually when we first launched smart contracts, where artists could mint and kind of deploy and control their own contracts. Again, totally different era. I think like, that we just take that for granted, but we had to kind of build that back in 2021. And Holly was, very, very excited to work with us on that. And then I think it's just gone on to become such a strong voice in the space. And, very proud to own this piece from the classified collection that I think will age very well.
I love this. This is such a good example of having information asymmetry. You were aware of these great artists and these works in a way that very few were at that time. And such
I mean, literally, Holly and Matt were like part of the reason I started the platform, and were a big direct feedback loop. So yeah, it was strange, because I agree. Buying their work was just an obvious thing to do, not even that particularly speculative. And I think over time, though, it'll also serve as something that'll be very valuable as well.
Yeah, and they're crushing at the moment. They're released with Fellowship in the last 6 months or so. One of my favorites, just visually, aesthetically, incredible work. Okay, Pri, over to you. I know what you're going to share, and very excited to see it through your eyes, because I see it on Twitter every day.
Yeah.
What do you have for us?
Yeah. An amazing collection, Kevin. I feel like that's just I feel like you have some of the most OG stuff. So I guess the collection I would share. So it's actually my PFP on Twitter. It's Color Study by Jeff Davis. I can kind of run through the collection here, but it's special for like sentimental reasons. I think for me, I think like when Art Blocks launched, it was really like Squiggles and Color Studies together. Jeff, along with Snowfro, has helped build Art Blocks to what it is today. And so I think I remember minting these, and if anything, I think like Color Study was probably one of at least my like first 20 NFTs. And so I had it as my PFP for a while, like on Instagram and on Twitter. And I think Jeff's amazing. I like love the aesthetic. I think it's very simple, kind of an ode to like Joseph Albers era work. And I know Jeff is continuing to do his work in Bright Moments. So following his career, I think it's just been a fun piece.
I love
and
that.
one I love.
Such a good share. If I'm not mistaken, Jeff is the only artist to participate in every Bright Moments, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I collected one of his pieces on site in Tokyo, which was very special for me. But that's a great share. Finally, we get the behind the scenes of the famous Priyanka PFP on Twitter.
Yeah.
This has been such a great show. Two OGs with so much context and scar tissue from the last number of years. Great conversation. Kayvon, I'm assuming, we can send people over to Rodeo and to your Twitter. Is that right?
Please.
Got it. And then Priyanka, where's the best place to send folks?
Yeah, my Twitter. Pre-decide.
That's great. All right. Well, such a great show. Appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll be back next week.